Hello and welcome back. In previous videos I've been quite critical of Christianity and also pointed to other people's, especially Friedrich Nietzsche's critique of Christianity and the problem in the West, the spiritual problem that we're having in the West. And that really makes me think that there's a need to find something to replace it. I think there's a bit of a hole, a spiritual hole that needs to be filled that resonates particularly with our culture or at least our ancestry. We do have quite a strong religious community in this country, in the UK, the Muslim community, and in 1990 there were less than 1 million Muslims in this country, and now there's approximately 4 million. So they are growing proportionally very, very fast as a group within the UK. Is that the religion that the Northern European, the indigenous or historically indigenous Northern Europeans can rally behind in place of Christianity? I don't think so. And the reasons are pretty obvious. It's a completely different culture. The cultural differences are causing issues already, or they have been doing ever since the Muslim community started to grow. There's big cultural differences between that go back 1,000 years. It's effectively that it would be effectively replacing one Abrahamic religion with another Abrahamic religion that has effectively failed, in my opinion, or is failing anyway. I think a lot of people that identify as Christian probably aren't practicing Christians. Church attendances would probably support that claim as well. So yeah, I've talked about one Abrahamic religion replacing another. Another reason why that wouldn't work, aside from cultural reasons, is that they're both sectarian. And that's another reason, the sectarian nature of Abrahamic religions, that's another reason I sort of feel like I want to steer away from both of those and look for something further in the past. And I've sort of toyed with the idea of going back to when our ancestors were heathens and worshipped multiple gods. So Odin, for instance, and Thor, or Wodan, or Wotan, and Thor, who would be the god of thunder, or at one point would have been the Sky Father. So these gods have evolved over time, and they've changed, and a lot of the information has been lost with regard to the metaphysics. There's a little bit of information with regard to Norse metaphysics, but it's extremely complicated, and there's big gaps in our understanding of that, the metaphysical framework that J.R. Tolkien did a very good job of creating a story out of, a fictional story that wasn't that far removed from their metaphysical universe that to them was very real. So the reason I've actually sort of gone down this thought process was because I was investigating dreams of God in the Bible and the Quran. So I was looking at the sort of Jungian concept of the collective unconscious and linking that with, or better put, is the Jungian concept of the self. So the process of individualization, where you're integrating your unconscious with your conscious mind, and that is a process of individualization. So another term for that is self-actualization, which is a sort of psychotherapeutic term. So Jung believed that the self was the source or a source of infinite wisdom. And he linked that, I mentioned it, the collective unconscious, and he linked that to the collective unconscious. And that the collective unconscious contained all of our ancestral memories going way back to the point when we first started to evolve. All that information is locked up in this kind of concept of the collective unconscious, which is accessible in our dreams, certainly in our dreams, maybe in other mental or conscious states or unconscious states. So anyway, I was curious to sort of like look into whether there was any kind of historical records of people's dreams, sending them messages that may have sent them on some kind of a journey, and created a sense of fate to them. And there's quite a lot of stuff in the Bible. So I'll read a couple. Well, I'll read the first one from God, apparently. So this is from Numbers 12:6. He said, "Listen to my words. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams." And I've got another one here. So King Solomon, God asked him if there was anything he wanted in his dream. And Solomon answered, "An understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil." So in other words, God offered him anything he wanted in his dreams, and he responded that he wanted wisdom. And according to legend, he was granted wisdom through God. King Abrahamic, I probably mispronounced that, but he had a vision in his dream. But God came to Abrahamic in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are but a dead man, because of the woman you have taken, for she is a man's wife." And that was Abraham's wife. Abraham as in the Abrahamic religions. So I've got a couple more, but I'm not going to read them. But there was 4 dreams that Saint Joseph as in Jesus' dad, he had 4 dreams where angels came to him and gave him either instructions or warnings, which he followed. And famously, Muhammad in the Mount Hira cave had multiple dreams where God visited him, and that formed the basis of the Quran. And they were prophecies as well that he fulfilled. So if we can just step aside from the idea of whether it's actually God, as in this kind of all-powerful being coming to someone in their dreams, if you think more in terms of self-realization of fate, so the concept of fate, it's quite interesting. What I find interesting about that is that it was if someone came to you in a dream and delivered a prophecy or warned you of something, it seems like they took it very seriously. If this is anything to go by, people took it very, very seriously, and people became prophets based on accounts of dreams and interpretations of dreams. But then, if you delve a little deeper, then you get a glimpse of the problematic sectarian nature of these religions. So this is Deuteronomy 13:1-3. "If a prophet or one who foretells of dreams appears among you and announces to you a sign of wonder, and if the sign of wonder is spoken of or takes place, and the prophet says, 'Let us follow other gods you have not known, and let us worship them,' You must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer. The Lord your God is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. I did miss up the reading of that, but you got the gist of it. He's saying that whoever he is, God, if someone else claims they're a prophet and they're talking about gods that don't represent the version of me, as in God, then you need to dismiss them. So it's my way or the highway. There is no universal spiritual matrix that everyone is a part of. It's like you're part of my tribe or you're part of the other tribe, and that's very similar to the kind of vibe that comes out of the Quran as well, which is, part of the problem with regard to Islam in the UK at the moment. So one of the things that I've sort of uncovered in my search for something more universal that transcends sectarianism in religion is the precursor, I suppose, the sort of pre-formative religious philosophy that evolved into Buddhism and Hinduism, and it's called Sanātana Dharma. Sanātana Dharma. Still getting used to saying it because I haven't actually said it out loud. Sanātana Dharma, and that means Sanatana translates as the, hold on a second, it's Sanskrit, and Sanatana means the eternal, and Dharma means the natural law that governs all things. So it means the eternal law, that natural law that governs all things. It sounds quite similar to the Tao. So concepts like Atman and Brahman, Atman being the sort of spiritual core that's in every living thing, and Brahman being like the Tao, the sort of force of nature, the more external force. These all have evolved out of Sanātana Dharma. I'll read you a short passage that goes into a little bit more depth from the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita by Eknath Iswaran. I've made this quite difficult for myself with all the pronunciations today. And this goes into a bit of the philosophy, and it really is better thought of as a philosophy and a way of trying to understand what consciousness is, rather than a religion, although I am putting my spiritual chips behind Sanātana Dharma at the moment because it does seem to tick the boxes that I've been looking for. So I shall start the quote. We can also think of the gunas, he's talking about this concept of the gunas, as different levels of consciousness. Tamas, the lowest level, is the vast unconscious, a chaotic dumping ground for the residue of past mental states. Unconscious is, in this sense, has something in common with Jung's collective unconscious, in that it is the repository not only of past experiences, but also of our evolutionary heritage, the basic drivers of the human being's animal past. This record is shared, of course, by all human beings, and at its deepest levels, the unconscious is universal. There is no choice in tamas, no awareness. This is complete ignorance of the unity of life, ignorance of any other need than one's own basic urges. Rajas is what we ordinarily mean by mind, the incessant stream of thought that races along, desiring, worrying, resenting, scheming, competing, frustrating, and getting frustrated. Raja's power is released, but uncontrolled and egocentric. Sattva, finally, is the so-called higher mind, detached, unruffled, self-controlled. This is not a state of repressive regulation, but the natural harmony that comes with unity of purpose, character, and desire. Negative states of mind do still come up, prompted by tamas and rajas, but there is no need to act on them. So I talked in my last video about Maya, which was the sort of illusion of separateness, and it did touch on that briefly when it talked about the ignorance. The ignorance of the unity of life, and that this is part of this metaphysical framework as well. So tamas effectively is the unconscious mind, like Jung's collective unconscious. Rajas is basically the ego, and sattva is the self, and those are the gunas that were mentioned. They're not Arsenal football team, but that's what those three things mean. So I hope that gives a bit more of an insight into the Sanātana Dharma, which is the early form of Hinduism. And I mentioned that about connection with the ancestral past, like from a personal point of view. And this religion or this philosophy was common many thousands of years across much of the globe, including Europe as well. So our ancestors in Northern Europe were part of that metaphysical framework. I'm conscious that I say framework a lot, but anyway, thank you very much for listening. It's been a slightly longer video than planned and slightly rambly, but I appreciate you watching.